Welcome everybody to today's presentation focusing on the general category of learning the language of diversity and meaningful inclusion. I am Tim Flacco, Chair of the Advisory Board for the Northern Plains Ethics Institute. And I'm here on loan from Tri-College. Always got to plug Tri-College a little bit. Today we're excited to hear from Dr. Teri Finneman, a native North Dakotan. Currently, Dr. Finneman is a journalism professor in the School of Journalism and Mass Communications at the University of Kansas. Finneman is also the author of Press Portrayals of Women Politicians, 1870s to the 2000s. She is a multimedia expert and a former reporter from the Forum of Fargo Moorhead, WDAY, WDAZ TV, and WDAY AM radio, and many more of the Forum family. Dr. Finneman is a past chair of the Association of Education in Journalism and Mass Communications History Division. Her presentation today is entitled, I Always Watched Eyewitness News Just to See Your Beautiful Smile, the ethical implications of sexism on TV news. After her presentation, we will have time for moderated conversation and audience questions. And you can enter some of those in the chat box if you wish, I believe, Dennis. In this talk, Dr. Finneman will argue that the rise of social media in recent years has created increasing concerning problems for women who work in television as they receive sexist and downright sleazy comments from viewers on their social media accounts. Through a national survey and analysis of journalists' Facebook pages, it's become clear that employees are not doing enough to protect their employees and the supportive social media policies. This session includes an open discussion of sexism and how to shift cultural attitudes towards women in the workplace. Today's event is provided free of charge to you, courtesy of Leann Wolff of Great Outcomes Consulting, the Northern Plains Ethics Institute, and Humanities North Dakota. And with that, Dr. Finneman, the platform is yours.
Thank you for having me today. So I have two tracks of research that I do. Most of my research is historical in nature, taking a look at the past, but all of my research tends to intersect with gender in some way. And so for today's research, as Tim Flacco mentioned, I am focusing specifically on issues with women in broadcast. I very briefly worked in broadcast, but I'm very interested in the intersection of social media and how that impacts journalism as well. So I did a couple of studies related to this topic. I'm going to start out talking about the very first one that we did, called Sexism on the Set. And this study was a survey that we conducted as a preliminary kind of study, looking at how, what kind of feedback we got from broadcasters themselves about what they were dealing with. So the idea for this study came from an article that came out several years ago. You probably heard about it at the time, where a male broadcaster wore the exact same suit to work for an entire year, the same clothes for an entire year, and nobody noticed and nobody commented on it. But in the meantime, his female co-anchor, came to work with, her regular change of clothes every day. And she got a tremendous amount of sexism and judgment based on what she was wearing, even though he had really not changed clothes for a whole year. And so this really piqued our interest about the significant problem that there is. I think a lot of people tend to think that we are at a place of equal gender rights in this country, and that's really not so. And we see that reflected in broadcast journalism as well. So this is obviously not the first time this topic has been studied. Sexism has been an issue for women in broadcast since the very beginning. But other research done in 1997 with 250 local TV news anchors found that they had great concerns at that time that there was too much emphasis on their appearance and not their actual journalism. And so we were working to update this study and see if that trend had improved at all in the last 20 or so years. So we partnered with RTDNA, which is the major broadcast association in this country, and ended up getting responses from 70 people. So it was a very, very small exploratory kind of study. As far as the people that we heard from, the majority of them were between the ages of 20 to 40. Most of them were women, most of them were white, and most of them came from smaller markets, so smaller cities as opposed to the New Yorks and the Washington DCs, but more markets kind of the size of, Fargo, Moorhead, Bismarck, those kinds of markets. So the vast majority reported that at some point in recent times, they had received viewer criticism about their appearance, and this came from anchors and reporters across 26 states, illustrating that this is a significant problem across the industry itself. How they got that criticism really varied. Facebook and Twitter, of course, were key areas, but it was interesting to note how many of them receive emails criticizing their appearance, and how many of them get it in person. We had one of our anchors tell us a story about leaving a grocery store and being cornered in the parking lot by a man who just suddenly started giving tips on how to improve their appearance on the air. And this man's wife was standing right next to him, agreeing with everything that he was saying. So, even when you're just out in the community doing regular chores, like going to the grocery store, some of these TV anchors and reporters can't escape constantly being under scrutiny for what they look like, as opposed to their actual job of delivering the news. Not that they should be accosted at the grocery store for that either, but you know what I'm saying. Social media, of course, has made this problem even worse, with virtually all of the people who responded to the survey saying that social media has really worsened this problem. Before, it was a little more difficult to have to make the effort to find an email address, to find the phone number to the station, to find the address to send a letter to. But now with social media and people being able to instantaneously provide critique, this has greatly enhanced the level of stress that a number of people in television are feeling. And then, of course, there was no doubt about it that women absolutely receive more criticism about what they look like than men do. So here are some comments that we heard from the broadcasters to kind of humanize the kinds of things that they're dealing with. So we did have some men respond to the blanks that we had in the survey, with one saying, "A viewer told me I shouldn't wear pink shirts on air because it sends the wrong message to boys." So this version of masculinity that viewers think should exist, going down to the color of their shirt. You look like a homeless man with a grizzly beard. You're the worst dressed on-air journalist in America. Now, when we just kind of see these on the page, homeless man with a grizzly beard, you may be apt to maybe even chuckle a little bit at that. But think about your own job, where if you are receiving these kind of comments on your page, you're constantly getting them day in and day out, it starts to take a toll. Let's take a look at the female broadcasters. "Thank you so much for changing your hairdo tonight. You look so professional and adult looking. Every time you were on as the news anchor with that unflattering do, it made me wish more than ever that you would change, and here tonight you did. You're such a pretty girl. With your hair off your face, now we can see your beauty." This is not a beauty pageant. That these are professional women who work tremendously hard. And all that seems to matter to these viewers is what they look like and if they're beautiful or not. Here's another one. "We adore you, but please cut your hair. Your hair is outdated and it's distracting from your pretty face." Again, this is not a beauty competition. These are serious journalists who are working every day. But the thing that comes up over and over again is this emphasis on what they look like. Okay, and then it gets even more serious. And since we're being broadcast over Facebook, I won't read this out loud, or not all of it anyway, but they've been called fat. Others have talked about me in sexually explicit ways. And this borders on just flat out creepy and unsettling for women to receive this kind of content. So I asked these women, why? Why do you think that you're getting more criticism than men about what you look like? And they had some, really thought-provoking answers, I think. Societal standards of beauty. There's a narrow scope of the notion of beauty for women. We persist in treating women's bodies like their community property. This one was very telling. I have no idea. It's just exhausting. It's just exhausting. And women and men are still not equal in this country. This is how these women feel going to work, doing their jobs every day. I had one anchor say that she's had to call in sick to work because she just could not mentally deal with going to work after being attacked by viewers based on her appearance. And that's a pretty serious workplace issue. So of course, the instantaneous nature of social media is a tremendous problem when people are sitting watching a newscast with their phone or their laptop right next to them, not taking the time to think about the repercussions of what they're actually doing, just throwing it out there and not thinking that the journalist at the other end is an actual person, and that this takes a significant emotional and mental toll on them personally as well as professionally. And that's, as I just said, they feel safe to be extremely rude as they don't seem to feel like you're a person when it's done online. Here perhaps was one of the most interesting things about the study, because I don't think it's any secret that women have to deal with sexism, but one of the most interesting things was that these broadcasters reported not having any training whatsoever from their stations on how to cope with this. So a lot of them just put up with it and stay silent because they feel this need that we can't make any viewers mad. We can't lose viewership because that affects advertising dollars, and money ends up being prioritized over the well-being of the employees. And so that was one of the things that came out, and this was several years ago now, that they absolutely wanted to have guidelines from their employers about how they are supposed to deal with this, because it's very unfair for them to just have to take it. So from that exploratory study, we then went in another direction and wanted to take a look at some of these comments ourselves. So in the next study, the one that's titled, I Always Watch Eyewitness News Just to See Your Beautiful Smile, we decided to analyze the social media comments that some of these anchors were getting ourselves and look for common themes. So I'm going to move to my next presentation, my next study. And as I do that, I think it's important to take a step back and think about gender more broadly and when these issues actually start. Because it doesn't just start with women in television, it doesn't just affect women in television. I think this quote by Shirley Chisholm is really telling, that the emotional, sexual, and psychological stereotyping of females begins when the doctor says it's a girl. And I would argue it begins even before that. As we see through gender reveal parties, there is an enormous emphasis on gender in our culture remaining today. And even before you are born, you are deemed to be pink or blue. And what your determination is has a tremendous impact on your life and how your life is framed. So I'm going to show you an example of a video here real quickly that shows how this starts even in childhood.
Welcome, welcome. Here are your new company laptops. David, you can't wear that. It's a girl color. Oh, here. Pick that one or that one. Yeah. Yeah. That's cute. See? Yeah. No. David can do that.
I've never done that before.
How's yours?
It's, manly.
No. I have something better.
Okay, so let's start looking over the presentation. If you guys wouldn't mind cleaning up when we're done, that'd be great.
Madeline, that's a little bossy.
If you guys could clean up after we're done, that would be great.
Good leadership, David.
Okay,
I think that'll be it.
that's all.
Boys will be boys.
My favorite color's blue.
I actually really like pink.
So taking a look at how childhood gender stereotypes play out in the workplace, right, is a little bit of a humorous way of putting this into context. But again, from the moment we are determined to be pink or blue, it tends to influence what kind of toys we are exposed to, what the expectations are for how we behave. And this ends up continuing through the teenage years. So then we have expectations of beauty that align with this.
So, grade 5 please, cameras rolling, and we're recording sound. Slated? Sounds great.
So with the image that we just saw on the billboard, this is what teenage girls are exposed to through the kinds of media that they read, right? This old version of 17 magazine, Look Pretty Now, right? That is the emphasis, that is the headline that jumps off the page, emphasizing to women that that should be the most important thing to them is what they look like. Cosmo, of course, tends to emphasize men, how women need to make themselves sexually appealing to men. So these are the kinds of messaging that women get, and then this is reinforced. And then as they move throughout their lives, this continues to be enforced to them that this is what women's role should be. Now, of course, the story was in the forum a few years ago about the redoing of a magazine cover, right? Rather than focusing on fall fashion, how about let's focus on cool things that girls are doing and what their dream careers are and how they're excelling in math and science, right? That was a really great story. And we are starting to see some of that change. But when you have decades of, and centuries, quite frankly, of gender role norms in this country, it's something that takes a long time to change. So as I mentioned, what we ended up doing in this study, taking into account what we knew about gender already, we wanted to look specifically at the Facebook pages of women TV anchors and see for ourselves what kind of abuse and harassment they are receiving. That is open to the public to see, right? This isn't something that is just for their eyes only, but something that publicly is being fed. And when it's not responded to, then it's taken as being acceptable behavior and it just continues. Now we're taking a look at this through an ethical standpoint, not only the emotional and psychological impacts that it has on these women themselves, these women journalists themselves, but also the self-censorship of journalism that can occur when women start to be afraid to put anything out there because they're worried that they're going to be attacked in some way. So that has implications for the field, as does women like the one I mentioned, who was so upset by what she was dealing with that she was calling in sick to work. You start to have some of these women just leave journalism altogether, even though they're excellent journalists providing really great information for their communities. They're just leaving journalism altogether because they can't take it anymore, or because they're forced out, because they've aged, right? Because you tend to have younger women involved in TV broadcasts than older women, right? Older men are distinguished, whereas when women age, they aren't deemed as preferable, okay? This is especially relevant in television journalism. So what we as journalists were told as social media has developed in the 2000s is that this was a really important platform for us to develop interactivity with our readers, to get them engaged, to get buy-in from them, right? Especially in the context that journalism has been dealing with in recent years. And let me say for the record, we are not the enemy of the people, and that needs to end right now. So there has been this increased focus on interactivity to have to humanize ourselves to other people and engage with readers. We felt a lot of pressure to do that and to build community. Of course, social media has been a good way for us to break news and get information to communities faster. It's not all bad. It's also aided the reporting practice. When I was working as a Capitol reporter, the first thing I would do in the morning before I was barely awake is scroll through social media to see what legislators were talking about that day, and if there were any story ideas that I should be prioritizing about what they cared about. And then you also have this 24/7 access, which is both good and bad, right? To be able to get information at all times but then journalists feel like they have to be working nonstop throughout the day and never get a break, and then it leads to burnout. Now, personal branding is especially been important in television from the very beginning, right? I mean, we're all familiar with Walter Cronkite and the kind of personal brand that he has developed. And so television feels this much more than we in the newspaper industry did, but it's been there since the beginning. And this has become even more important in recent years as local television news has declined in ratings, because now that there's so much more media, now that people are self-selecting and only tending to look at media that aligns with their views in a lot of ways, you're seeing some of the general media landscape lose viewers to go to this more kind of niche areas. So because of that decline in ratings, you are seeing the journalism industry trying to fight back and figure out how to get these people back, these viewers and these readers back. And so there's been a significant more push for personal branding and having that interactivity and trying to create community with your readers and viewers. There's also been a push for greater transparency within journalism. But through all of this, there's also been this push for personal celebrity, right? Because we're also in this era of celebritization, right? Where you need to be a personality. And TV anchors, I think, especially feel that. But then, of course, there's this opening for exploitation when you do have this kind of celebrity status. Other things that need to be taken into consideration with women in broadcast is that it is an extremely male-dominated industry. Now, that's not necessarily bad on its surface, but why that's a problem is that that's only one perspective. And so that's why you have so many discussions about why there need to be more than just white men at the table, because women and people of color bring varying perspectives and different life experiences. And so when you only have one segment of the population in charge and having significant sway, that greatly influences the expectations and trickles down to everybody else. So women feel not only the pressure to be good journalists, but also to perform as women and to fulfill these unrealistic standards that our culture has about what the role of women is in society, and having to really work hard to be seen as likable. I was talking about Ken and Barbie journalism earlier. That's when you have a distinguished older man doing the news and then a younger woman in her 20s. That's very common throughout this industry, and this overemphasis on appearance instead of on actual professional journalism. So going back to what I was saying about being a male-dominated industry, 2017 data from RTDNA showed 76% of TV broadcasters are white and 85% of news directors are white, with 70% of directors being men. And in radio, those numbers are even higher. Okay, so we need to work better at diversifying our industry so that we get more perspectives in the room to be able to create more change. So the two themes that we looked at in this study is, what kind of themes did we see in the kind of comments that people were leaving on their accounts? And then, what are these characteristics, and did these anchors respond to these comments? So in this case, we looked at the top markets in this country, the New Yorks and the Los Angeles, Chicago's, stuff like that. And we looked across the three major networks, looking all in all at 121 women anchors' Facebook pages over about a month of time in 2018. So not surprisingly, these were the key themes that we saw of the kinds of comments people were leaving on their Facebook pages, with an emphasis on their clothing, their weight, their hair, and this notion of parasocial relationships. And what that means is that viewers feel like they know these TV anchors. They feel like they're friends. They feel like they have a personal relationship with them, even though they don't and have never met this person in their lives. Now, parasocial relationships are not all that surprising, because think about it, when you're watching TV news, these people are coming into your home night after night. They're with you, so to speak, as you eat dinner, as you get ready for bed, right? You feel like you know this person because they're in your home day after day after day. But you don't actually know them, right? You just think that you do. So that's how parasocial relationships work. And we saw that play out in kind of creepy ways in some of the comments that were left, and thinking that they were the friend of this anchor and this anchor would want to know what their feedback was. So as far as clothing, we saw, some complimentary messaging. It wasn't all negative. Anything on you would do the trick. You look beautiful in yellow. You're the most fashionable anchor and you look awesome in pink. Now, one may think, well, these are positive comments. Like, what's wrong with this? This isn't a problem. But the problem is that the emphasis is on their appearance. And this is not an appearance job. They are working as professional journalists, providing critical information for our community. And yet they're being judged on what they look like. So even positive comments are problematic, especially because once people start leaving comments about appearance, that then is, a snowball down a hill of thinking, okay, well, we can comment on appearance, so let's give some negative comments as well. You must have lost weight. You have a beautiful body figure. Now, for those of you, I don't know what professions you all have, but I want you to think about if you showed up for work someday and a coworker came up to you and said, you have a beautiful body figure. Now, that would be just really creepy, disturbing, right? But when people leave this on the pages of TV anchors and people in broadcast, nobody thinks anything of it. And that's really problematic, okay? Again, as I talked about the snowball effect and it just getting worse from there when the door is open for commenting on appearance. This channel has Wonder Bras working when they're in the studio. Again, imagine if people were making these kinds of comments around the break room in your workplace. This is highly unacceptable, right? And then post a full body pic next time. So this objectification of these women is extremely disturbing. And what's even more disturbing is that it's still normalized in this day and age. Here's some other adjectives. Just imagine customers, students, whoever your client base is that you work with. Imagine that they are leaving these comments for you constantly. You're stunning, you're sexy, you're beautiful, you're smart looking. What does that even mean, right? You're smoking hot, a total babe. This is really gross. This is really gross that this is cycling over and over and over again in the kind of feedback that they're getting, emphasizing that what they look like is the only thing that matters, not their actual job. Parasocial relationships, again, thinking that they're friends with these people they don't even know. You look stunning, my beautiful friend, my beautiful queen. Wish I had a chance to take you out. Don't think nothing crazy. I'm a normal guy, just like you too much. Yeah, no. I received some of these comments myself, and I never told anybody about this. When I was on television on WDAY, I wasn't on air very often. I mostly just voiced stories because I wasn't comfortable being on air, but sometimes I would. And I had one guy in particular who kept sending me Facebook messages asking me to marry him. And it was very disturbing, but I didn't tell anybody because as women, you just feel like you're just supposed to take it. And that's just part of what being a woman is. Okay, and it's not. This should not be just what being a woman should have to take. Come be my lover. Do you need a date? These are public comments that people are leaving on people's Facebook pages and not having a single thought that there's anything wrong with doing this. Another stress that journalists are dealing with, as I said, with the personal branding is we feel like we have to be working 24/7. We feel this constant pressure with ratings, especially in television, that we have to keep ratings up. So we need to be working all the time. So that means even when we're on vacation, we may be posting photos on vacation to stay in tune with readers. Here I am at the Grand Canyon or whatever, right? To keep that up. And it's just exhausting to have to work 24/7. So we saw kind of three themes of what TV anchors were posting on their Facebook pages. One, self-promoting their work, right? Tune in at 5 o'clock, make sure to watch the news tonight. I'm doing a story on this, be sure to read it. Just flat journalistic posts, just, posting story links. And then a lot of self-promotion outside of work, what they were doing with their dog, or if they were at an ice cream shop or just whatever, just constantly feeling a need to be a celebrity all of the time. So self-promotion at work, when they were posting things like, tune in at 5, taking a shot with them and the weatherman or something like that, these were the kind of comments that they got. I love you. 3 gorgeous beauties. You're still smoking hot. So watch the news at 5. We have more on what the governor is doing. I love you. That's the reaction that they're getting for what they're posting. Here we move into some gross sexualization. You look a little bit naughty. It's the hazard of having boobs, so flat out commenting on their chest. And in this case, the anchor actually replied back, which I would not have advised doing, making this kind of behavior acceptable. And then, of course, you have your typical social media commenter who cannot spell, a beautiful striper, stripper dancing in boots with a half pole. Awesome. Again, think about if this is the commentary you are receiving day in and day out for the job that you're doing. It would get extremely disturbing after a while and start taking a toll that you're just supposed to, have this be acceptable. So as I talked about making posts when they're on vacation, even when they aren't at work, one was on vacation in Detroit, thought you might enjoy this beautiful, this photo. Her response is she got, you're adorable, stunning, beautiful. Another took a photo while on a hiking trip and got responses, I'm in love, I'll go with you. And then she took a selfie with her dog for National Dog Day. You're a cutie, you're beautiful, you're gorgeous. Again, this constant reinforcement that their appearance is really the only thing that matters about them. So further implications, there needs to be much more discussion and limits put in place on how should journalists engage with audiences on social media. People are always so worried about offending a customer, offending a viewer, offending a reader. But at what point do we need to step up and protect our employees and what they're dealing with and say enough is enough, and we can't keep putting up with this, right? What kind of policies do we need to have in place? Can we have journalists just start deleting this kind of commentary from their feeds? Do we need to force journalists to be on social media if they're not comfortable doing that, right? We need to be having these discussions, but also look internally at ourselves. And when a female anchor comes on the air, are we automatically thinking, oh, look at the dress that she's wearing tonight, right? And why is that? Why is that we as a culture immediately go to that instead of what the anchor is saying? What role do media organizations have in dealing with sexism and helping protect their employees? And this is across the spectrum, not just local news, cable news, any kind of news, right? And how do we need to work to better protect our employees? So this is the kind of work, and let me tell you, as a researcher, this is not easy work to do. I've talked about sexism. If we added racism to this, you can only imagine the further disturbing commentary that we would be reading. We need to keep in mind that women of color are dealing with significantly more issues than this, and think about all of our roles in society and what we do to perpetuate this kind of norming and what we can do to stop it and make changes for women, no matter what kind of field that they're in. Okay, so I am happy to take any questions. I also tend to primarily focus on sexism and issues that women in politics and first ladies have to deal with. I'm giving a first ladies talk on Thursday, actually. So I can also talk about that more if there aren't any immediate questions.
Dennis Cooley has a question or comment.
Thank you for the presentation. I knew it was going to be bad. I didn't think it was going to be this bad, what was said about women. And I had a question, but I think a little bit better one, which is how much is contributing to the turning of news into entertainment, infotainment? Because if you look at cable, those folks have to be perfect almost. Their physical body, the way they look, they have to be athletic and so on. And you don't see very many, and I don't want to say I'm a normal person because I'm overweight, but you don't see sort of normal as the standard.
Yeah, well, and your use of have to be, right? That's the sole problem, right? Why do they have to be? Yes, cable news, I would say, has some significant problems, and there has been a whole movie made about it as well. If you have not seen it, I highly encourage you to understand Roger Ailes a little better. But yeah, why is this? Why is this? And part of it has to do also with the responsibility of viewers. Because when you have viewers who are reinforcing that you're doing this, then there is no urgency to change. So people need to vote with their feet, to vote with their remote controls, and provide support to organizations. Oh, good. I'm glad that Robin's here. And Robin, not to put you on the spot, but if there's anything you want to add, certainly feel free to chime in as well. But certainly us as a culture need to be making changes and making these people change.
Dr. Finneman, I have a question, and then we'll go to Kathy Coyle, who has a question. In terms of social media, does it vary if the person puts what might be perceived as their real name on, say, Facebook? So it's like Tim Flacco, as opposed to, I mean, there used to be somebody that would post as German Shepherd, like 222 or something like that in the Fargo area. So you had no clue who he or she was. And then they didn't put a picture or anything that would lend you to believe who they might be. Are you seeing that with any of your research?
No, we initially were going to do more of an analysis, taking a look at the kinds of people that were doing this. But that was like kind of a whole nother dimension, and would be kind of a whole nother study. Every now and then we would move our cursor over the name to see if they were local or stuff like that. Obviously in this day and age, it's hard to tell who's a bot, who's working and who isn't. But overall, it did appear like these were actual people in their viewership area leaving these kinds of comments. And, predominantly male, but we also have to keep in mind that there are also women leaving these kinds of comments. So women are also causing problems by reinforcing these problematic gender roles for other women as well.
Well, next we'll go to a former local reporter, Kathy Coyle, who has a comment that she has.
Okay, Tim, thank you. I was on the air from 1973 to 96 in the Fargo market. Repeatedly got comments about my hair. That was a common whenever I would change it even a little bit. Parasocial, I got gifts from a lonely older man, and I surprised his small town when I went to his funeral. They thought that he was making a fool of himself, and I could see the value in the fact that Uncle Fritz supported my career. I wanted to make a few comments. Rachel Maddow wears a black suit every night, and so I think it would be interesting to do a study, and I think you could do it with Photoshop. Rachel having different clothes on versus Rachel the way she really does her show every night in black every night. She obviously feels that she doesn't want people seeing her clothes compete with her message. Parasocial thanks David all the time on ABC News. So they've created this real relationship with David Muir, and it's worked. He's #1 by far. And Hoda and Jenna feed on allowing viewers to choose their clothes. They have a competition almost to have people respond and let them. So they've kind of gone at it, realize that this is an issue on TV, and they've allowed people to participate. Okay, that's enough for me. Thanks.
No, that's great. Thank you.
Dr. Finneman, we have a question from the audience that I'll read to you. You mentioned that journalists do not receive any training on how to manage these issues. I'm curious about the expectations via contracts. Do most contracts require social media interaction for journalists? And do most contracts include clothing allowances? Do they specify the type of clothing to be purchased? And are those allowances the same across gender?
That's a good question. I can only very briefly speak to that because I was personally primarily employed by the forum. I didn't have a separate contract to work for any of the TV stations. It was just kind of side. It was just part of the whole package. But just briefly talking with some other general managers, whether there's a clothing allowance or not probably depends a lot on the size of the market that you're working in, if you even get one. There was a station in the Midwest that had a clothing and makeup guidebook that they gave to all of the reporters about what kind of color clothes you should and shouldn't be wearing, ideal hairstyles, ideal makeup styles. And then they were in the process of making one for men. And I said, well, I want to see that one because they didn't have one. They didn't have one for men. And then all of a sudden, I think they kind of got some heat for having the women guidebook in the first place. And so that was the end of that. But I think it probably really depends on what size of market that you're in.
Okay, thank you. And again, if you have questions, put them in the chat box and I'll do my best to relay those to Dr. Finneman. Another one from a listener in Mobile, Alabama. I want to just make that up. Do those that deliver the news differ, or are they similar to those that deliver or report on sports? Is there any reason to believe that one is different than another?
That's a good comment, or a good question. And in this case, again, because we had to narrow our study, we ended up just looking at the news side. But yes, I mean, there is significant, you know, I would say perhaps even more so for women in sports because they are entering a male arena, right? We very much know the issues that Erin Andrews has dealt with in recent years, even going back historically, and into the 1990s when you have the woman reporter who's going inside the football locker room and dealing with significant harassment from the players themselves, sexualization, dropping their towels and mocking her in front of them. Yes, women in sports have a significantly harder time being accepted within that arena. And that continues to this day. I could put up another video, but it's very difficult to listen to about the kinds of harassment, even worse comments, worse than we saw today, that two major women in sports have dealt with.
And then a comment from Rick Yoon, who I think you know from a variety of ways. As someone who worked in media sales for 10 years, the clothing allowance is mostly trade for advertising with specific clients.
Good to know. Thank you.
Again, if you have questions, next question I have is personal versus, I'll call it company posts. Do reporters or news people or, you know, any kind of people who work on television, do they feel that they shouldn't block people? Because I've got to the point in my life where if somebody is doing something, bye-bye, you're gone. And it's not, I don't feel bad at all about it. But when I was in politics, it was a lot tougher to block somebody because you go, well, I mean, so what's the kind of the balancing act between people who are abusive towards you, but also maybe others within your Facebook or other posts that is guiding people these days?
You know, I think that's a great comment, and I think that is definitely worth a follow-up study. I mean, these pages that we looked at were actual pages and like identified with their station identifiers, right? I mean, they were specifically their work page as opposed to a friend page, right? It was a like page instead of a friend page. And I mean, the fact that these comments were being left, they were there. We looked at this content over the period of a month, and we really didn't see anything that was being deleted or changed in the meantime. So I think that they do feel this pressure that they should just leave these comments alone and let them through. And I think that's really problematic. Now, of course, it's been 3 years since we looked at those Facebook pages, although sadly, I don't think much has changed in the 3 years if we replicated the study again. But I do think that there need to be much more conversations with these women to give them more agency to speak up and to not feel like they have to call in sick because they don't want to deal with this that day.
So a little bit different question I have for you is I was in the Senate for 18 years. I see former Senator Grinberg's here. He was over 20 years. But as an elected official, you almost feel like you can't have a no-shave weekend where you just go to the grocery store to look grungy. Right. I mean, do the people that you're talking about in a way feel like they're locked into this too, where they have to really, just can't be themselves and just go to the convenience store and pick up some soup?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. One of the anchors that I know in South Dakota who posts quite a bit. I mean, he's constantly being talked to at the grocery store. I don't know if he can ever get through the grocery store, quite frankly, although viewers seem to be kinder to him. But yeah, absolutely everywhere they are, no matter what they are doing, right? I mean, people, you know who your anchors are. They're very recognizable people in your community. And when you see them, again, having this parasocial relationship, you feel like they should want to, right? They're the friendly face on your TV. So you feel like they should be thrilled to say hi to you while they were, buying eggs. And so the lack of boundaries there, again, yes, making them feel like they have to be on 24/7. And thank you, Robin. Yes, I mean, you could give this whole lecture yourself, I know, from all of your experience. So if there's anything that you would want to say, please do so.
Yeah, Robin's written in, and I was trying to multitask here, and I'm not doing a good job. But she would love to give some input. So many triggers from the bit she's heard, and I don't know if Robin, I think she's listening on via her phone, so it may not be the exact easy platform. But Robin, if you do want to chime in, you're more than welcome to, if it kind of works with your technology here. So, and then reminder that all this is being recorded, and it will be kind of pulled together, editing, and it will be made available on the Northern Plain Ethics Institute's YouTube channel and their Facebook page. So, Dennis, did you have a question or comment?
I would like to talk a little bit about how to address the issue with the folks who are the media companies, because I'm hearing about training for the women involved and so on. Frankly, I don't understand why there has to be social media where people have to do this in the first place, but then again, I'm not in that field. But what would you say to these folks? Would you want whoever is the head of it to say, cut this out? These are our standards, and as soon as you put one of these things on, we're deleting it. We're not even letting this person see it. What would be the expectations for the people who are making money off the media?
Yeah, that's a good question, and, of course, we have to think about how ownership works in television, right? That they may have a very supporting local news director, they may not, or general manager, but this also goes up to corporate policies and what they expect throughout all of their stations, as far as appearance guidelines and all of that. So it's one of those things that kind of starts with corporate America, which is one of those things that's also difficult to take on. But I think that there needs to be real discussions in newsrooms among employees, being honest with their news directors and general managers, and them taking it up and keeping this pressure on. You will sometimes reporters and anchors who will fight back, especially those who are not stick thin and get comments. You have seen them go on the air and flat out confront viewers that this is the kind of post that I got. I'm a person, don't do this to me. And there tends to be a very brief, kind of rallying around that person as they also get further criticized some more, but then there's that one shot and then it dies off. So there is just not this coordinated effort. And part of that comes in with the fact that as journalists, we are just slammed. There's fewer of us than ever before because everybody's so busy focusing on profits than actual focus on information delivery. So there's fewer of us. We're doing 5 times the work, especially with multimedia now, right? You have to do your 3 different versions for television, your web story, your social. I mean, it is nonstop. There's no time to do anything. There's no time to think and have these kinds of broader conversations. And so that's why you're seeing some of these conversations move into higher education, and those of us who are professors having to have these conversations with students of, this is what you're going to deal with. Here's how you should brace for it. How can we help you get ready for what you're unfortunately going to have to deal with? So it's a very huge problem. It's a cultural problem that is going to take a long time to chip away, but it starts with every single person in this room and voting with your feet, with how you view, writing in, sticking up for these women when you see that they're being attacked, dropping them a note saying, I support you, you're doing a great job in journalism, right? All of those little kinds of things make a difference too.
Dr. Finneman, just a question or observation. We may, Robin may be trying to connect here, but it appears to me on my anecdotal observation that the nastiness scale, TikTok number 1, Twitter number 2, Facebook number 3, and Instagram 4th, you know, the least nasty. I mean, were you able to, I know we're pretty far in the weeds with this kind of, but are you seeing differences in platforms in terms of nastiness?
That's a good question. We only looked at their Facebook pages for this particular study. I mean, just anecdotally, Twitter has been known to be among the worst. Probably in large part because with Instagram, it tends to be more kind of positive. You don't have a lot of political kind of commentary as much. It's designed to be a positive space, where Twitter and Facebook are designed to be more of an adversarial kind of pace. You know, with TikTok, you mostly have just members of Generation Z on there right now. It'll be interesting to see if more generations get involved. And that's how Facebook originally was too, right? It was just meant to be a place for younger generations. And then the, so to speak, grown-ups came into the room and ruined the party and created this more of a toxic environment that we have now.
Yeah, I mean, it went from like a nice little casual conversation to like a Roman Colosseum. You know, it's just, some of these places have gotten awful.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why, one of the reasons why I don't Twitter, but I'm not going to speak. But Robin, were you able to connect, or are you able to ask or comment?
Well, I don't know. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. I am driving somewhere. So I really have been kind of very in and out of this conversation because I've just been busy for the last hour and a half. So I've only caught little bits and pieces, but yeah, all of it's true. All of it's frustrating. And, you know, I've gone through most of it.
You know, Robin, would you be willing to make any kind of comments? How is change going to happen? What's it going to take?
Oh man, I don't have the answer for that. It's just, it's kind of, it's so entrenched and has been that way for so long that maybe the only thing that will change is if we get to a point where there really aren't presenters somehow, like, you know, maybe it's just a show where it's just story after story after story, or delivered by a robot or something. I don't know. I don't foresee it changing because for those reasons, it's just too entrenched in the mindset and in the viewers' mindsets too.
Absolutely.
Well, Tim's going to have to leave us. He has a 1 o'clock appointment. And my name is Dennis Cooley. I'm the director of the Northern Plains Ethics Institute. And I want to thank Tim for doing that. But I also wanted to get to Kirsten Nelson's comment. Kirsten, are you able to read that? I can do it. Kirsten wrote, it sounds like the lack of support from the news organizations goes beyond a lack of training to a very hands-off approach in letting individual journalists deal with this on their own. Is that accurate? Are there any models out there from news organizations who have been more proactive about this?
Yeah, that's a good question. In the study that we did several years ago, you know, we had that large percentage of people across 26 states telling us that they didn't have any policies. Since then, certainly there are a lot of media companies with social media policies, including what we can and cannot say on social media. And you've seen a lot of news stories related to that, and people being fired and whether they should have been. Thanks, Tony, for coming. As far as if there are any good models out right now, as far as how to deal with trolls, that's a good question. And that's something that I'd like to look into next. I've spent the last few years, or year and a half, 2 years or so, primarily focused on the impact of COVID-19 on community journalism. So I've moved away from studying women in broadcast. But I think that is a significant next step, is to take a look at, have there been any changes? Are there any policies in place to take care of this?
Well, I see we're almost at the top of the hour. So is there anything you would like to leave us with?
I would just say thank you for coming, because everybody who attends these talks and takes something away, I mean, all of that makes a difference, right? It really makes a difference. drop a note to your favorite journalist today, tell them they're doing a good job. The journalism industry has just been through, I mean, we all have, but a lot, right? I mean, these are the people in the early days of COVID when you didn't know if we could even go outside, right? They were out there providing you information, putting their lives at risk, making sure people knew what was coming on. This coming off of years of being called the enemy of the people, of declining subscriptions, declining ratings. Journalists have been through a lot, and a lot of it is extremely unfair with how hard that they do work to serve their communities. So subscribe to a paper today, watch local news, drop a journalist a line and thank them for what they're doing, because that'll go a long way.
Well, I always evaluate a talk based on how many ideas it gives me to think about, and this one has a huge one. I'm worried about what Robin talked about, and that maybe we'll replace all human beings with AI configurations along the lines of max headroom. But max headroom, that people my age know what that means. Hopefully the rest of you know. It's all AI. It's not a real person anymore, which would be, I think, bad, because news should be about people, told by people.
Exactly.
But I want to thank Teri for a really provocative talk. As I said before, this will be recorded and edited, recorded, put on the NPEI's Facebook page and also in our YouTube channel. I want to thank all the folks who helped sponsor this, including the Humanities North Dakota and Leann Wolff, who is gave a very nice contribution to this. And so on that note, have a great day, and we'll see you all later. Teri, could you stay on?
Yeah, I'm actually going to answer. Anne has a really interesting question that I actually wanted to address.
Well, go ahead then.
Is it optimistic of me to think that the younger people today growing up, the situation could get better? I actually am just about to have a study come out related to this. One would think so, but we're still seeing the same kind of problems. So we did an analysis of a student newspaper, and we looked at the different diversity fault lines of gender, race, and what the student newspaper was covering. And we saw the exact same problems in the student newspaper as we're seeing in the broader industry itself. So help may not be quite as quickly on the way as one would think, because they tend to be repeating these same kind of patterns. Certainly they are more open to different gender norms than past generations, but we still saw a predominantly male front page, the men's sports teams getting larger photos, getting longer stories than the women's sports teams. So these kinds of problematic trends are still continuing with Generation Z as well. So anyway, on that note, thank you for your last minute question as we wrap up.